Imagine a government spending thousands of crores to build a massive nationwide database, right? Tracking every single citizen.
Right, a huge administrative undertaking.
Yeah, only to realize the architecture has this fundamental loophole, a loophole that actually allows foreign nationals to legally register to vote.
I mean, that is essentially what happened, at least according to the original architect of India's PAN card. He argues that's exactly what the state did when it chose to build Aadhaar instead of, optimizing the systems it already had.
It's wild. Today we are diving into a masterclass in, well, structural complacency.
Oh, definitely. When you examine how these massive bureaucracies and legacy corporations operate, you see this recurring theme.
Right.
There's this heavy preference for comfortable redundancy over sharp and honestly sometimes painful efficiency.
And we're unpacking all of this through a genuinely fascinating source today. We're looking at the June 2026 cover story of PreSense.
Which is a great publication.
It really is. For those of you who might not know, PreSense is actually India's oldest e-magazine. And it has this incredibly unique pedigree.
Yeah, the origin story is pretty special.
Right. It was launched back in March 2006 on the direct suggestion of former President Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam.
Wow.
Yes, specifically to promote positive journalism. And it is actually still run by its original managing editor and publisher, Prime Point Srinivasan.
That kind of longevity in digital media is rare. And the piece we are looking at today is an exclusive interview conducted by their editorial board member, Deepa Lenin.
Right. And the subject of the interview is just a legend.
Absolutely. She sits down with Shri M R Sivaraman. He's an IAS officer who retired as the revenue secretary to the government of India.
And he's, what, 86 years old now?
86, yeah. And still incredibly active. He's still addressing public forums on economic issues. I mean, we're talking about a man who prepared 5 national budgets.
5 budgets. That's massive.
Yeah. And he also served as an executive director at the International Monetary Fund. So he is considered one of the ultimate authorities on fiscal policy in India.
He is basically a walking institution.
Right.
But to really understand this radical blueprint he has for India's future, we kind of have to understand his past.
Right.
Because Sivaraman is the father of the permanent account number. The PAN card. Okay, let's unpack this because the origin story here is fascinating.
It really is. The detail from the source that sets the stage perfectly is the actual rollout of the cards.
Oh, yeah. Tell them who got the first one.
So when the system launched, the very first PAN card was issued to the then finance minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh.
Amazing.
And the second card ever issued went to Sivaraman himself.
Which is a great piece of trivia. But let's look at how it was actually built. Because back in the 90s, digitizing records for a country of India's scale.
Oh, it was a technological nightmare.
Exactly. So Sivaraman, alongside the chairman of the Central Board of Direct Taxes, Sri Rangachari, they actually looked at systems in Canada for inspiration.
Right, but taking a Canadian system and applying it to India requires a lot of translation.
Yeah, so to actually make it work, they brought in the Tatas.
They needed that heavy-duty corporate optimization. The Tatas came in to iron out the entire data architecture.
Because we are talking about structuring massive, chaotic physical tax records.
Mountains of paper.
Yeah, turning all of that into a searchable relational database. And they managed to streamline that framework in about 6 months.
Which is practically light speed for a government project of that era. I mean, it's unheard of.
It really is. But the PAN card we use today, it's actually just a fraction of what Sivaraman originally proposed.
Yeah, his blueprint was far more ambitious. He wanted the PAN to be the universal baseline ID across every single tax domain.
Central excise, imports, exports, sales tax, all of it.
Exactly. He even mapped out a pilot program in Maharashtra to align their sales tax nomenclature entirely with the PAN system.
The mechanism he designed for this was so elegant.
It was. Every citizen or entity would have this single baseline number, but it would carry a state-specific suffix.
So, like, if you were operating in Maharashtra, your ID would end in MH.
Right, and in Tamil Nadu, TN.
Which immediately localizes the administration while maintaining federal oversight.
Exactly the intent. A tax officer instantly knows the geography and the entity just by looking at a single string of characters. A totally unified financial and civic identity.
But the political leadership at the time, they just put the universal proposal into cold storage.
Yeah, they opted to keep disparate systems for different taxes instead.
I mean, think about it. It is like a massive corporation deciding to build a brand new, highly complex HR database from scratch just to track employee attendance.
Right.
completely ignoring the fact that they already have this active, highly accurate payroll system that tracks exactly who is in the building and when.
Yeah, you just end up maintaining two massive servers to do the job of one.
Exactly. And Sivaraman argues the government fell into exactly that pattern. He calls it the trap of card multiplication.
Which is a great phrase. And years later, when the Goods and Services Tax, GST, was finally implemented, the state suddenly realized, oh, wait, it was far more efficient to use the pan architecture as the base rather than inventing a new wheel.
Right, but by then, that culture of multiplication was already deeply entrenched. And this leads to Sivaraman's highly critical and somewhat controversial perspective on Aadhaar.
Yeah, his critique of Aadhaar in this interview is very structural, very pointed. During the national census, Sivaraman says he directly advised the then Home Minister, P. Chidambaram, to utilize the census data collection to issue a single, definitive citizenship card.
Because the census enumerators were already going door to door.
Exactly. The boots were on the ground. It was the perfect vehicle to establish verified citizenship.
So what happened?
Well, according to Sivaraman, a very powerful corporate CEO heavily influenced the government's direction at that specific time, and the result was the parallel rollout of Aadhaar.
Instead of the citizenship card.
Right. And Sivaraman points to a fatal flaw in this decision. He argues Aadhaar is proof of residence, not proof of citizenship.
Which is a massive distinction. That means anyone living in the country can get one.
Indian citizens, overseas citizens of India, foreign nationals, anyone.
And Sivaraman argues this creates a massive vulnerability, doesn't he?
He does. He notes that foreign nationals can use and have used the Aadhaar card to illegally register on the voter rolls.
Because it looks official, so local authorities just accept it.
Exactly. From a policy perspective, Sivaraman argues that if the state was determined to issue a unified ID to non-citizens, they should have at least mandated a completely different color for those cards.
Oh, that makes sense, just to visually flag it.
Right, to visibly protect the democratic process from that kind of exploitation.
So we see a government essentially rejecting a streamlined, universal system in favor of redundant, overlapping programs that don't even secure voter identity.
It's frustrating.
And Sivaraman pivots from this to argue that this exact same mindset, preferring comfortable monopolies and redundancy over sharp optimization, he says is fundamentally strangling India's corporate sector as well.
He really directs this critique squarely at the massive Indian conglomerates, the family-run empires like the Tatas, Reliance, the Birlas.
Right.
He basically asks, why isn't India exporting manufactured goods at the scale of a global superpower?
And what's his answer? He contrasts these family lineages with merit-based global giants, right?
Yeah, companies like Google, run by Sundar Pichai, or Microsoft, led by Satya Nadella. In those arenas, professional merit determines the board of directors.
You have to earn your spot.
Exactly. But in India, Sivaraman argues the overarching motive of these family-run monopolies is simply domestic profit maximization.
Right, because they dominate this massive, highly protected domestic market.
They don't feel the existential need to go fight in the trenches of international trade.
What's fascinating here is how that domestic comfort breeds scientific complacency.
Oh, 100%. Sivaraman points to the state of corporate research and development in India.
It's pretty bleak.
It is. These conglomerates announce net profits in the tens of thousands of crores. Massive capital. Yet they reinvest an incredibly small fraction of that into genuine domestic scientific research.
And he actually explicitly calls out the Tatas on this front in the interview.
He does. He acknowledges they spend on R&D, but he notes the vast majority of that capital is deployed abroad.
Right, like specifically engineering vehicles for Jaguar in the UK.
Exactly, rather than nurturing high-level diversified science and technology hubs within India's borders.
And the consequence of that is, without domestic R&D, you are basically just assembling other people's technology.
You can't dominate global exports if you don't own the underlying intellectual property. It's just that simple.
But, if you are listening to this and wondering why your online package takes 4 days to cross 2 state borders in India, when it would take overnight in the US or China.
Right.
Sivaraman points out that corporate laziness is only half the equation. The physical infrastructure is actively working against exporters, too.
The logistics data he presents is just bleak. Between 60 and 70% of Indian freight moves by road.
Which is the most expensive way to do it.
Extremely expensive. Rail transport is significantly cheaper, costing roughly 1.5 rupees per kilogram. But moving that same cargo by road jumps to 2 or 2.5 rupees per kilogram.
But the cost isn't even the worst part, is it? It's the velocity.
It's so slow. Indian cargo trucks average a daily distance of about 300 kilometers.
300.
Yeah. In the United States, a truck covers 700 kilometers a day. In China, they hit 500 kilometers comfortably.
So our supply chain is literally moving at half speed.
And Sivaraman highlights a very specific regulatory issue to explain this sluggishness. He brings up a mandate set for October 2025.
Okay.
It requires truck manufacturers to provide air-conditioned cabins for drivers.
I mean, that sounds progressive on the surface until you look at the fine print.
Exactly. The mandate only applies to newly manufactured trucks.
Right. So the millions of older trucks already out there on the highways are totally exempt.
They remain metal ovens in the brutal Indian summer.
And Sivaraman argues this is discriminatory, right?
Well, yeah.
And just economically foolish.
Yeah. He proposes mandating the retrofitting of all roadworthy older trucks with AC within a single year.
Because cooling the driver isn't about luxury.
No, it's about endurance. A rested driver operating in a safe temperature can safely cover twice the distance in a single day.
That makes total sense.
Yep.
You effectively have the logistics time without pouring a single new inch of highway concrete.
Exactly. But then you compound that physical exhaustion with the fact that state governments aggressively levy a 20 to 24% tax on diesel.
Ouch.
And they routinely bottleneck highways with state border checks. The entire logistics network is just bleeding capital before the product even reaches a port.
It sounds impossible. Yet, despite this totally hostile logistical environment and the lack of corporate R&D, Sivaraman points to one sector that is aggressively seceding on the global stage.
The Indian pharmaceutical industry.
They are the glaring exception. I mean, they are actively discovering and engineering FDA-approved molecules.
Yeah, during the COVID-19 pandemic, Indian pharma essentially became the pharmacy of the world.
Even Donald Trump openly acknowledged it. He said that 40% of the U.S. generic drug supply relies entirely on Indian manufacturing.
It is a phenomenal scale of production. However, Sivaraman introduces a heavy reality check regarding raw materials.
Right, because we don't make everything ourselves.
No. To try and break our dependence on Chinese imports, the central government launched the Production-Linked Incentive, or PLI, scheme specifically for active pharmaceutical ingredients.
Just to clarify for anyone outside the medical field, an API is the active pharmaceutical ingredient. It is the actual raw chemical compound that cures the illness, not just the pill casing.
Right. And historically, India imports a massive volume of these APIs from China.
So the PLI scheme was designed to incentivize companies to manufacture these APIs domestically.
And it worked to an extent. It resulted in 30 new API manufacturing units coming online.
30 is a lot.
It is. But the Indian pharma sector is growing so rapidly, and the global demand is so high that even with these new domestic plants, local production just cannot meet the sheer volume required.
So the reliance on Chinese imports hasn't actually dropped.
It hasn't. And Sivaraman points out that China actively deploys non-tariff barriers to deliberately stall Indian pharmaceutical dominance in their own markets.
Let's unpack non-tariff barriers, because that term gets thrown around in economics a lot, right?
Yeah, it does.
It basically means a country isn't using a straightforward import tax to block a product. Instead, they use bureaucratic red tape.
Exactly. China might suddenly demand that an Indian drug undergo a completely new, highly complex local lab test that takes 2 years to complete.
Or they indefinitely delay sending safety inspectors to the Indian manufacturing plant.
Yeah, it is a quiet administrative freeze-out.
And while navigating those international hurdles, Indian exporters are also highly sensitive to geopolitical shifts.
Oh, massively.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Sivaraman delves into the recent U.S.-Iran peace agreement discussed in the sources.
He notes it as a massive tailwind for India.
Because prior to the agreement, geopolitical tensions forced Indian merchant vessels to take incredibly long, circuitous routes to avoid conflict zones.
Right. Sivaraman explains this devastated Indian exporters in March and April.
Because international buyers refused to sign long-term contracts burdened with wildly inflated freight and insurance costs.
Exactly. But with the peace agreement formalized, those inflated costs deflate. Maritime routes to the Middle East and Europe normalize.
Indian shipping lines can aggressively book cargo space again.
It clears a major geopolitical roadblock.
But Sivaraman asks a critical question.
Sure.
Domestically, who is actually building the framework to help exporters capitalize on this?
He argues the central government is doing all the heavy lifting.
The center is actively negotiating free trade agreements.
Right, and they are implementing schemes like RODITEP, which stands for Remission of Duties and Taxes on Exported Products.
Essentially, this mechanism refunds the hidden local taxes embedded in the manufacturing process so that Indian exporters can actually price their goods competitively on the global market.
Yeah, and the center is also ensuring zero-rated GST for exporters, so they are doing a lot.
While the center clears the macroeconomic path, Sivaraman is highly critical of the state governments.
Very critical. He says they routinely take unearned credit for export booms.
He specifically calls out Tamil Nadu, right, for boasting about massive electronics export numbers.
Yes. He argues the state merely hosted the factories, while the actual boom was driven entirely by Apple's global pivot and the center's PLI scheme.
So what does he want the states to do?
He believes states need to abandon the PR campaigns and do the unglamorous foundational work. They need to build dedicated administrative cells solely to troubleshoot for exporters.
That makes sense.
And most importantly, he suggests states should utilize government-owned land to construct massive, heavily subsidized labor hostels.
Oh, housing.
Yes, housing the manufacturing workforce safely and affordably is a critical bottleneck that states are just ignoring.
But fixing the hardware, the highways, the tax refunds, the worker housing, that only matters if you have the right software.
Right.
And Sivaraman believes the software of India, its human capital, is fundamentally broken.
Yeah, to dominate the global market over the next 50 years, he proposes a complete radical reengineering of the education system.
This is where his blueprint becomes deeply provocative. Sivaraman proposes taking a sledgehammer to the current academic structure by immediately scrapping the archaic three-language formula in schools.
To understand why this is such a massive shift, we'd have to remember why the formula exists.
Historically, it was implemented as a political compromise for national integration.
Exactly, ensuring students learn their regional language, Hindi, and English. But Sivaraman argues that whatever its original intent, it has devolved into a useless administrative burden.
His logic is entirely pragmatic. Forcing a student in Tamil Nadu to spend years learning Hindi, or a student in Madhya Pradesh to learn Kannada.
It creates zero professional value in the modern economy.
They memorize it for the exams and forget it within 2 years of non-use.
And the ultimate output of this system, according to Sivaraman, is a flood of unemployable graduates holding generic degrees.
He uses this phrase, third-class history BAs.
Yeah.
Students who spend years memorizing texts only to enter an economy where their only option is hunting for low-paying, white-collar desk jobs that just don't exist anymore.
So to replace this, Sivaraman proposes a vocational revolution.
So what does this all mean in practice?
He argues for capping the language requirement at 2, then starting from the 10th standard, make vocational specialization absolutely compulsory for every single student. Yeah, it doesn't matter if you are the child of a senior IAS officer or an agricultural laborer. You must master a highly specialized technical trade to graduate high school.
And we aren't talking about basic carpentry or basket weaving here.
No, he is targeting future-ready fields. Electronics, artificial intelligence, robotics.
He points to the electric vehicle sector as proof of capability, noting that Mahindra's latest EVs possess electronic architecture so advanced, it actually rivals Tesla.
Right. Modern vehicles are essentially rolling computers. We need a workforce trained to build them.
Think about the socioeconomic impact of that. If a 16-year-old student struggles with traditional academic testing and fails their standard math paper,
but they have spent 3 years in a state-certified lab mastering the programming of manufacturing robotics.
They completely bypass the traditional university bottleneck. They possess a tangible skill.
Exactly. They can be instantly hired by Amazon Logistics, Flipkart, or Tata Motors.
They enter the workforce with immediate value, and they always have the option to upgrade that vocational certificate into a formal engineering diploma later on.
Sivaraman connects this directly to the industrial dominance of Germany and China.
Right.
Those nations are manufacturing superpowers precisely because they deeply respect and fund vocational training. In Germany, a master tradesman or a highly skilled carpenter isn't viewed as a secondary citizen.
No, they can comfortably command salaries equivalent to $100,000.
To fund this massive shift in India, Sivaraman suggests a radical reallocation of capital.
How does he pay for it all?
He proposes that the central government, combined with corporate social responsibility funds, the mandated CSR money from those highly profitable conglomerates,
Wow.
that money should cover 80% of the cost of building cutting-edge technical laboratories in every high school and hiring actual industry experts to teach in them.
It is a complete structural pivot. Move the capital away from generic degree mills and pour it directly into creating pure, marketable expertise at the high school level.
It really is.
Which brings this entire deep dive directly to you listening to this right now. Look at your own professional environment. Look at the educational paths being pushed onto the teenagers in your life.
Right.
Are the systems around you still prioritizing the accumulation of generic credentials, the ability to memorize a third language for a standardized test, and the collection of multiple redundant ID cards? Or are they actively prioritizing practical, globally competitive skills and streamlined efficiency?
This raises an important question. Sivaraman's entire blueprint forces us to confront our own resistance to change.
If we could wake up tomorrow and instantly implement this vision, a single, unified, PAN-based citizenship identity without loopholes, and a purely skill-driven vocational high school system funded by corporate profits, where would the friction come from?
Would the biggest resistance really come from bureaucratic politicians protecting their administrative turf?
Or would it actually come from a society that is deeply, fundamentally addicted to the prestige of its traditional university degrees and the familiar comfort of its redundant systems? It is something to seriously mull over as you navigate the bureaucracy of your own day. The pursuit of real knowledge never stops, and we will be right here next time to unpack the next big idea. Stay curious.